This is Torah Nation TV from Jerusalem, and we are interviewing the head of Machon Shilo, Rabbi David Bar-Hayim. Shalom, Harav Bar-Hayim.
Shalom.
Harav Bar-Hayim, you compare Yom Haatzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim to Chanukah. Why is it then that we do not say HaNisim on these days?
Well, your question assumes that we do not say HaNisim, but in fact, I do say HaNisim, and there are others who also say HaNisim on these days. The question is, why do many people not say HaNisim? And this is a very good question. I've always wondered about this because there are many Jews who say Hallel, many of them with the bracha, which in my view is correct, during the day, not at night. There are many Jews who say Hallel with a bracha on Yom Tekumat Yisrael, which is Yom Haatzmaut, and Yom Geulat Yerushalayim, or Yom Yerushalayim. But HaNisim they do not say. When in fact, rationally, halachically, if anything, it should be the other way around. To add some words of praise to Hashem in the bracha of Mudim, in the Shmoneh Esrei Tefillah, and the prayer that we say whilst standing, this is entirely mutar according to all poskim. That is why we say HaNisim on Purim and Hanukkah, as is discussed explicitly in the Talmud, in Masechet Shabbat, for example, regarding Hanukkah. And precisely because it is mutar, it is permissible to add certain prayers and words of praise, etc., in that bracha, or for that matter, in any bracha, in any one of the benedictions of the Shmoneh Esrei, we are allowed to add a prayer that is related to the theme of that bracha. This is stated in the Talmud, in Tractate Avodah Zarah, Daf Zayin. This is quoted by the Rambam in Ilchot Tefillah in the 6th chapter. This is mentioned by the Tur in Siman Tau Kof Pe Het, Taf Kof Pe Bet, I should say, which is 582. In the Tur, speaking of Rosh Hashanah and the additions that most Jews add during those 10 days from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, such as Zochrenu L'Hayim and Michamocha V'Rahamim, etc. There is such an addition also in the bracha of Mudim. And despite the fact that some of the Geonim were opposed to this practice, the universal practice nowadays, as agreed to and as spelled out by all the Rishonim, including the Tur and the Hagot Maimoniyot on the Rambam that I mentioned before, and many other Rishonim, the universal practice, and the Rambam himself also agrees to this, that it is permissible to do so. The universal practice is to mention these extra tefillot during those 10 days, precisely because there is no halachic problem in so doing, even though these additions are not mentioned in the Talmud. All these additions that we speak of, Zochrenu L'Hayim, and Uchtov L'Hayim Tovim Kol B'nei Beritecha, etc., all these additions are not mentioned in the Talmud. They are clearly post-Talmudic in origin, which is also why if you did not say them, you do not have to repeat the tefillah, and yet it is permissible to say these things. So I've always asked myself, in fact, the question, why is it that some Jews feel that to say some form of HaNisim on these 2 days, Yom Tekumat Yisrael, Yom Haatzmaut, and Yom Geulat Yerushalayim, or Yom Yerushalayim, why do they feel that this is problematic, but saying Hallel, which involves a bracha, as many of them do, and this would be challenged by some, why do they feel that's not a problem? Why is this not an issue? So I find their position, in fact, illogical and very difficult to explain. I certainly do not accept such a position. The truth of the matter is that all these things go together. Hallel, HaNisim, etc. A day when one is proper and fitting, on such a day it is also proper and fitting to say the other.
It is Chazal who instituted saying HaNisim on Purim and Chanukah. Who gave the Rav the right to add HaNisim for any other day? It is Chazal who instituted saying HaNisim on Purim and Chanukah. Who gave the Rav the right to add HaNisim for any other day?
Well, no one in fact gave me any such right. I did not claim to have any special rights. I do claim that we have to base our halachic practice on the explicit statements and the general principles laid down by Hazal. Hazal tell us regarding Halil in the Talmud Bavli Masechet Pesachim Daf Kof Yod Zayin, in the tractate of Pesachim in the Talmud 117, it states that the Nevi'im, the prophets, this is probably a reference to the latter-day prophets at the beginning of the Second Temple period, instituted Hallel to be said on any occasion when the Jewish people found themselves in great peril of either being annihilated or being enslaved. When they found themselves saved from such peril and such danger, in order to thank Hashem, they were to say Hallel. So it says in the Gemara in Masechet Pesachim. And Rashi and the Rashbam also, in their commentaries there, explicitly state Kegon Hanukkah. For example, Hanukkah. In other words, Rashi is telling us that this injunction of the Chachamim to say Hallel on Hanukkah is simply putting into practice this particular takana, this injunction of the Chachamim. It was not a separate or special takana, a special law laid down to celebrate Hanukkah. It was a law, an injunction, a takana that existed well before that, from the time of the Nevi'im. And when the events of Hanukkah took place, it was understood by the Chachamim, and one assumes also the average Jew on the street, that in such a situation it is required and necessary to say Hallel, based on this ancient predated takana, which tells us how to behave in such a situation. So when a similar situation comes along, such as Yom Tekumat Israel, Yom Haatzmaut, or Yom Gulat Yerushalayim, Yom Yerushalayim, we are to implement this same principle, the same rule of thumb. The takana, in fact, is in place. We do not have to reinvent the wheel. The law, the halakha exists. We just have to know how to implement it. And therefore, it is correct to say Hallel. And for the very same reason, it is entirely correct and proper to say HaNisim. These things go together. On those days when we thank Hashem for such events, we say HaNisim. The proof is Purim, and the proof is Hanukkah. Of course, Hazal didn't speak about future events and future times, but these events to which we refer, Yom Tekumat Yisrael and Yom Gulat Yerushalayim, are events just as significant and important and based on the same definitions that Hazal speak of when discussing why Purim was instituted in the first place. When Hazal speak about this in Masechet Megillah, they explain that in any situation where the Jewish people find themselves in great danger, where there is a threat to their existence or to their independence, their sovereignty, their freedom, and they are saved from this situation, they are to thank Hashem. This is a requirement. According to the Hatam Sofer, in a couple of halachic responses, this is a chova min haTorah. This is a requirement based on something written in the Torah, because it's all based on the Shirat Hayam, the fact that the Jews broke out in a song of praise to Hashem at the time of the splitting of the Red Sea. So HaNisim is just part of the package. It's a package deal. If you have Hallel, you have HaNisim. So therefore, you may ask again, why do certain people not understand they should be saying HaNisim? I think the answer to that really is very simple. Even if a person does understand that Hallel should be recited on such a day, and of course there are many who do not understand this. There are many religious Jews who think that one is not allowed to say, or one is not required to say Hallel on Yom Tekumat Yisrael or Yom Gulat Yerushalayim. And they will probably base this understanding on the claim that, well, it doesn't say so in the Gemara, it doesn't say so in the Mishnah Berurah. In fact, I was once in such a minyan many years ago for Minha, Erev Yom Haatzmaut, and the minyan consisted of 10 Jews exactly, 5 of whom were Haredim and 5 of whom were Dati Leumi. And at the end of the Shmona Esrei, the Shliach Tzibur looked around and asked what he should do. And the guy who sort of ran that shul said, well, we're not going to say, we are going to say Tahanun. The question was whether to say Tahanun or not. And he said, we are going to say Tahanun. So half of the minyan did and half of the minyan did not. After the minyan, someone asked him, why did you say Tahanun today? He said, because I follow the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah doesn't say anything about not saying Tahanun on Daled B'Iyar. And that was his response, which is of course true. And one wouldn't expect that the Mishnah Berurah would relate to some future time. But this of course is a spurious argument and not even worthy of discussion. So I return to the point at hand. The reason some Jews who do understand that Hallel should be recited on such a day and yet do not say HaNisim is simply because reciting Hallel, which is after all just a collection of chapters from the book of Tehillim with the bracha before and after, is a set piece, so to speak. You don't have to invent anything. It's there. It's in the Siddur. It's in the Tanakh. You know what to say. You make the bracha. You recite the Pesukim from Sefer Tehillim, and that's it. You're done. In order to say HaNisim, you need to have an HaNisim. If you open up your average Siddur, you won't find HaNisim for Yom Tekumat Yisrael. In other words, you have to write one. You have to author one. And this is something that most people, including most Rabbanim, are not willing to tackle. They're basically, I would say, scared or fearful. They do not believe in their ability or in their right to do such a thing. Although it's not a question of right, it's a question of need. It's something that must exist. It has to be done according to halakha, and therefore someone has to do it. But because so many Rabbanim have been educated, have been trained to think that I don't understand, I don't know, I can't make a decision, I can't do something new, different, original, creative. Therefore, HaNisim is too daunting a task, too great an effort to take upon oneself. And therefore they prefer not to say HaNisim at all.
Rabbi Bar-Hayim, where can one find a copy of a nusach of HaNisim?
At this point in time, the nusach that I authored with the help of some of my colleagues some years ago for Yom Tekumat Yisrael and Yom Gudat Yerushalayim appears, this nusach of HaNisim appears in the Bircon, which is a card which was published in 2 formats, one a wallet format in which it does not appear because it just gives the basic everyday weekday version of Birkat HaMazon, and there's another table version which includes all the additions for different days of the year, and there one will find the HaNisim to be said on those 2 days.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim, and a word to our viewers. If you would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with Rabbi Bar-Hayim in honor or memory of a loved one, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.